Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe with Streamline Capital. Excited for today's show. We've got Tony Lopes as our guest today. Tony, welcome to the show.
Brian, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, do us a favor. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us an idea of your background and what you were doing before you got into real estate investing.
Sure, yeah, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of myself, and maybe it's very relatable to your audience, your listeners. I think it will be. I'm not a special case study. I think a lot of people can relate. I'm the product of immigrant parents. My parents came to this country from Europe and, relatively poor. We didn't have a lot of money, right? So my parents handed down to me and my siblings the same tablet, right? Go to school, get a good education, you'll get a good job, and you'd be taken care of forever. That was the tablets we were handed. That was very simple. That's what they knew as a path to success, to getting a great job. And that's what they shared with us. And me as a young man growing up, I didn't know any better. So I did what they told me to do. I went to school. I got a great education. I have a bachelor's in mechanical engineering and a MBA degree. So two great degrees. And I don't say that to be braggadocious. I say it because there's a reason for it. I'll get into it. So I had two great degrees. I had a great job. I graduated college, got a great job, making good money. And then I got laid off.
Oof.
With a bachelor's of science in mechanical engineering, MBA, I ended up getting laid off. And that was nowhere in the tablets that my parents handed down to me, Brian.
Yeah, you're supposed to work at the same company for 30 years, get that pension. Yeah. That's what my parents told me. So,
And so you can imagine that was a huge shock to me as a young person. I'm like, wait a minute, I did all the right things. That supposedly, that my parents told me I did all the right things. I was a good citizen. I was a good student. I was a good worker. But yeah, so maybe some folks in your audience can relate to that. I was a young man. I wasn't financially independent at the time. So I had to find another job. And so that's what I did. I found another job, which was okay. I don't talk negatively about having a job like a W-2 wager, and I don't, and we can go into that, but shortly after getting another job, I decided I needed to do something else to create another source of income. I wasn't ever thinking like, hey, I'm going to retire early, or I'm going to retire and go do real estate, like just full time. That wasn't even really my thought. Initially, it was just like, I wanted to create some additional cash flow for myself.
And was that driven by the layoff, or was that driven by something else?
It was driven by the layoff. Yeah. 'Cause honestly, it was like, holy cow, like I can't trust that I'm going to have full-time employment. Even though I did all the right things and I have these great degrees, I can't rely on that being the bread and butter, obviously, because I got laid off. I needed to find something else to supplement that for me. And so the reason why I don't speak negatively, so some folks say, get out of the rat race, get rid of your W-2 job, just invest in real estate. And I get that. However, if you're still in that W-2 environment, that job environment, know that there's a couple of, particularly good things that you have that I don't have at this point in my real estate investment career, so to speak. I mean, one thing as a W-2 employee, you have a consistent paycheck.
Yes.
You know what? Banks love that.
I go to a hard time getting a home mortgage right now because I don't,
Yeah, but it's harder if you don't have a consent. Like I don't have, so to speak, I don't have a job. I can't, produce a W-2, an employer or something like that to hang my hat on. So it's a lot harder for me to be able to, so to speak, get a mortgage. Whereas somebody working a job, they get consistent paycheck every week, every 2 weeks. That's consistency right there. And banks look at an individual like that like gold. So that's one thing because I know sometimes folks get, maybe beaten up a little bit, you got to leave the rat race. You got to leave your W-2 job, just invest in real estate. Yeah, I get that. But, don't feel bad if you're still, if you're a W-2 wage earner, because there's benefits to that. The second benefit I'm going to throw out there is the fact that a lot of people look for sources for their down payment for their first property or even their second property.
Yeah.
And I'm going to throw this out there only because it's something I used to scale. It may not be right for everybody, but I took a loan against my 401k. Right? It was right for me. I'm not saying it's right for everybody. You got to check.
I've done it twice. It was right for me too. Yes.
Right. So, I've gotten bashed by others about it. Oh, you should never read your 401k. You should leave it alone. And hey, it was right for me. It allowed me to scale and retire at the ripe old age of 44 years old. So I like to think I did something right.
Mhm.
But it's not for everybody. But if you have a 401k, know that that could be a source of funding for your down payment on your first or your second property. Whereas again, I don't have a 401k as an entrepreneur, so to speak, as a real estate investor. I don't necessarily have that. Whereas somebody who's a W-2 employee, you do. You chances are you do have that. So it's a good source. And at the end of the day, when you pay back that interest on that loan, because you're just taking a loan against your 401k, that interest that you're paying on that loan goes to you. You're paying yourself that
Yeah,
interest rate.
right back into your 401k account. Exactly.
So yeah, so I just started slowly myself. My first property was a Class C property. I knew nothing. I didn't think about it as cash flow. I didn't even know what the cap rate
Yep.
was. I didn't know how to calculate cap rate. I didn't know NOI. I didn't know cash on cash return. I didn't know any of that. And so one of the things I share with people is identify the metric that's important for you. Like for me, I looked at it and I said, hey, if I buy a 3-unit property or a 4-unit property, which
Mhm.
my first one was a 4-unit, and I just wanted to get like $200 a door in terms of cash flow. Even though back then I didn't call it cash flow, I was calling it profit. I wanted
Mhm.
to make $200 every month. And so for me on a 4-unit, that was $800 a month extra that I was making. And that's really all I was looking for.
Yeah.
Simple, simple, simple. I've been on so many podcasts and they're like, oh, what was the cap rate? What was the cash on the cap? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, my first couple of properties, I didn't know how to run numbers. I bought them on faith. It's just like everybody says, you buy real estate. And I mean, the whole buy real estate and wait idea, and it was my second property that I started realizing that I needed to do a little bit more analysis before, buying them because that one didn't cash flow. But I smile because I went through a lot of the same things. I didn't know cap rates or anything else. I just, yep,
Yeah.
bank
I
qualifies me
just
for a loan.
I
Boom.
just don't want folks to get paralyzed,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of gurus out there who throw a lot of things around and just don't get paralyzed. I mean, listen to, what Brian teaches. Just get started, right? Get started. Find that first deal, get
Mhm.
started, right?
Yeah.
And the rest will take care of itself from there. Are you going to make mistakes? Absolutely. Brian made mistakes. I made mistakes. We're not perfect.
I still make
We're
mistakes. I mean, yeah, 6, 8
every-
years, it's been 8 years now. Yeah.
everything on my first deal, my first 4-unit property, I like made mistakes all over the place. Let me tell you, I still own it today.
Mm-hmm.
What was cash flowing 800 a month now cash flows much, much more. I still own that property today and I've scaled
Nice.
from there. Despite all the mistakes that I made on that first property,
Yeah.
despite all that, it still led to my enormous success in real estate investment.
Yeah. And I could say the exact same thing. I had 3 single family investment properties, and I sold those when I decided to get into multifamily. And those were kind of like the seed money for multifamily. But, 2 of the 3 came from loans against my 401k. I lived in them as an owner occupant. How I was house hacking before, anybody really coined that term. I'd move into a house, live in it for a year or two, and then put a renter in and move to the next. So that's what made me eligible for the 401k loan. But when I started changing my focus and it's like, okay, single family is doing okay for me, but I really want to do that apartment thing, that's when I decided to sell those. And yeah, I think between those 3 homes and the, 18 or 20 or so apartment complexes I've owned, I've made every mistake in the book.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
And that's okay.
it's
Right.
okay. Yeah.
Now, we, you and I, both as
Mhm.
coaches, we do like to help people sidestep some of those mistakes, right? We've
Yeah.
made them. We don't like to make them again, and we certainly don't want other people to make those same mistakes. So,
Mhm.
right, we do want people to learn from our mistakes.
Yep.
And that's why we spend a lot of time with folks. We do these podcasts, we do different things. We do want to help teach others to achieve success in real estate and more freedom, right? Because at the end of the day, this is what it's about. It's about more freedom. Sure, we like to see our bank accounts grow, but that is just, so to speak, an extension that allows us to have more freedom. Because at the end of the day, we're not looking to be like, oh, geez, I want more toilets to unclog, or
Yeah.
I want to deal with more refrigerators that break down, right?
Yeah.
That's not what we want to deal with. We want to spend more time on the beach, more time with our family, more time traveling, more time doing the things we want to do to have a very full life.
Yeah.
We want to give back to others.
Exactly. The goal is not zeros in the bank account. Yeah, I like it. It's the freedom. It's the ability to do what you want. Simple, plain and simple. So, awesome, awesome, awesome. So let's talk about your progression from there. I mean, you talked about the first one, and by the way, wholeheartedly agree with the W-2. I didn't quit my W-2 until my income from apartment investing was greater than my W-2 income. And personally, that's what I recommend for other people. But anyway, back to you. You talked about the fourplex and everything. How did things progress from there?
Yeah, so I looked at it very much the same as you did. I wanted to have enough cash flow from my properties to be able to replace my W-2 income. And so for me, I'm a relatively conservative guy, right? That's just how I'm built. And so I put a factor of safety of 2 in there. So I wanted 2 times the amount of cash flow coming in to replace my income from my job. And so I actually waited longer.
Yeah.
I could have retired earlier than 44, but I was just, so to speak, conservative.
I'll put a little asterisk on mine. My W-2 is military, and I walked away with a pension. So 1X ended up working out well for me. But yeah, if you can 2X it, even better. And by the way, I was 44 as well.
Nice. Congrats, man. That's awesome.
Appreciate it.
Everybody's situation is going to be different, right? I don't look for folks to duplicate what I've done, either with how I got started, the type of buildings that I bought, or 2x my cash flow to leave my day job, right? Everybody's situation different. I was single, I didn't have kids, right? Somebody who's married, they may have some more leeway because their wife or their spouse is bringing in income.
Yeah.
And so maybe they don't need 2x, or maybe they do have kids and their kids are close to college or getting married or needing cars or whatever it is. And so maybe 2x is the right thing. I don't know, but
Yeah.
every situation is different. So I never want folks to just blindly follow like what Brian's done or what Tony's done. You really have to look at it's a case by case scenario. And again, that's why, we do coaching, is because you have to noodle through that and kind of dissect it and have those conversations with someone who's kind of done it and can help navigate those conversations, right? As I share with folks, and I say it all too often, and I kind of laugh about it because it's just kind of crazy. I'll be chatting with somebody, and they're like, oh yeah, I always wanted to do this, but I haven't. And I'll be like, well, why not? And it's like, oh, my sister said it was very risky. I'm like, well, how many apartments does your sister own? And he's like, none.
The answer is usually 0 when they say that.
Zero. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then it's like, my neighbor says that's, oh, you're going to be dealing with toilets and phone calls at midnight. And wow, you're going to be a slumlord. And it's like, how many apartments does your neighbor own?
Mhm.
And so we want to make sure people are chatting with the right folks who have actually done it, right?
Yeah. You mentioned the word slumlord, which is kind of funny because, at my last job, when I started buying apartments, one of the guys there started calling me slumlord. He's like, oh, Brian's too busy being a slumlord to, or whatever. Like every chance he had, he'd throw that out there. And, it is kind of funny how other people view apartment owners. It's like, I'm not a slumlord. We're taking the slums out. We're buying properties and we're fixing them up, but, yeah, it is interesting.
That's affordable living, clean, affordable living for folks.
Clean and safe. Yep.
Right. I think the days of slumlords are hopefully in the past, or very few and far between. But yeah, so in terms of my journey, I needed to get to 2x because that's just how I'm built. I needed 2x my cash flow to leave my day job, which was when I was 44. So I had built up enough multifamilies at that time. And they were all relatively small, a 4-family, a duplex. I did some residential single home construction, some homes part way through there. And that just helped me understand and solidify that I more so wanted to be in the multifamily space. I didn't really want to be a builder of single family homes. So that was just a deviation on my journey there. But so I share, a number of my initial properties were smaller properties. So you can get to financial freedom with smaller properties, whether you have a few single families, a couple of duplexes, some triplexes or quads, it is possible, right? I'm a living testament to that. So I had good experience along the way, retired at 44. And at that point, I look to my right and I look to my left and I'm like, where's all my friends? I'm like ready to go play. I want to go skiing. I want to go golfing. I want to go biking. I want to do all these great things, adventures. And all my friends were still working. I always had a huge fascination with macroeconomics. And so I spent about almost 5 years writing and publishing the book Freedom at Risk: How to Protect Your Personal and Financial Freedoms. I kind of started writing that. Wasn't supposed to be a book. It was supposed to be more of like a white paper, as I call it, like 20, 30 pages for my niece and my nephews, who I knew were not learning this stuff in school. And so I wanted to provide it to them as like 20, 30 pages, but I got to like 30,000 words and I realized it was a book that I had never intended to write. But it came from a place of love because I was really writing it for my niece and my nephews. So published that, got that out there. And it was really the catalyst that really helped me understand. And as I was sharing before you hit the record button, something that I talk a lot about today, speak about renter nation.
Yeah.
And so these days I go around, talk a lot about renter nation, and we can absolutely dive a little bit into that.
Let's do it. I think a lot of people should be hearing this. So yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So, I don't talk about it because I'm looking to push investors into real estate, so to speak. It's just a truism. I'm not here to talk doom and gloom. I'm not here to necessarily like push a specific narrative. It's just a lot of studying that's gone into how do you solve a particular problem. And when I look at what's going on politically, all I see is our political waste and our political spending at the federal and state level.
Yeah.
Is going to push property taxes higher. It just is. Right.
There's no other direction for them to go in most states.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a relatively easy source of income. The infrastructure's already there for property tax. All they need to do is adjust the percentage that you have to pay, per thousand on the valuation. So, okay, it's relatively easy. We've all seen it. All our property taxes have gone up recently. If there's somebody out there whose property tax has actually gone down, I'd love to hear from them. So our property taxes are going up. When we look at what's happening with energy, when you look at fossil fuels, we have already passed peak fossil fuel production. We're on the backside. It's just costing us more and more money to create energy from fossil fuels. And when the energy isn't there and solar energy isn't there to pick up the slack, that technology maybe one day is going to be, the greatest thing, but it's not there yet to pick up the slack. So energy costs, we've all seen it, they're going higher. The data is out there. This isn't, the world according to Tony Lopes. It just is, right? Yeah. Look at the data. It's out there. Energy costs are going higher. What used to be, you could take a barrel of oil, a barrel of energy, in essence, one barrel of oil, and back in, I think it was 1912, they produced 100 barrels of oil from that one barrel of oil, right? Today, one barrel of oil produces 20 barrels of oil. It's much, much less. And so why do I bring that up? Well, everything in housing, in the construction of housing, is a product of oil. You look at the shingles on your house. You look at the asphalt in your driveway. You look at your appliances, the plastic parts. You look at the plastic fibers that are in carpets. There's so much plastic and oil that is in a basket of goods for housing. That just is data that shows the cost of housing is just going to get more expensive. Affordability is going to get more difficult for the average person. So taxes are going higher on the property. Energy is another factor. When we look at just societal factors, right? People, younger people, and I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm not here to, cast stones and say young people are good or they're bad. It's just what is. younger people just have a different expectation on life these days. They want more experience-based events,
Yeah.
right?
They're getting different narratives from their parents than we got, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm telling my kids. It's like it's not all about work because that's what I saw my dad do. That's what my dad told me to do, and I'm like, yeah, this isn't it. But yeah, it's generational. I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, Brad. Exactly, right. And so, the younger folks, they're looking at it saying, I don't know if I want to own a house,
Yeah.
right? And so that pushes them more into a rental pool. And there's a lot of different data around society. As I share, I have one chart that I show when I present on this, basically talking about like Instacart, right?
Mhm.
Instacart exists, for a reason. There's a business around it today, right? Where 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, there wasn't a business around Instacart where people could order their food, order their groceries online, and they would be delivered to your door, right? Great.
Love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love it, right? And young people love that instant satisfaction
Mhm.
and the value that provides. Not
Yeah.
only that, we have Grubhub, Uber Eats, and different places that will deliver food already prepared to your door. So not only do the younger generation not want to shop for their groceries, they don't want to prepare the meal with those groceries.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we use those all the time when I'm traveling, but there's also like these meal services where they deliver, I mean, very similar thread, but I get like the meal kits where it does include a little bit of preparation, but yeah, I mean, I was outside, snow had all melted off and my sprinklers were on. I'm scratching my head thinking, oh no, one of the valves probably busted, because the sprinklers weren't supposed to be on. And the first thing that went through my head was, I wish I rented this house so I could call somebody else to take care of it.
Right? It's one of those things where,
Yeah.
generally folks
Hmm.
today, typically the more younger folks, they don't want to spend the weekend,
Hmm.
painting the trim on the house or cleaning the gutters or
No.
mowing the lawn. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, and I'm not saying they're bad people for that. I don't want folks, the viewers, to misunderstand me. It's just what is today. And not that entire pool is, so to speak, that way.
Yeah.
Some young people like to paint, trim, and clean gutters and mow the lawn, and that's great. It's just a general
Yeah.
trend. The trend
It
is
is.
more towards wanting to move away from
Mhm.
those weekend warrior projects.
I must be a lot younger at heart than because when it snows outside, I'm pulling out the weather app thinking, is it gonna melt in the next 24 to 48 hours? That's really what's going through my mind because I don't want to go out and shovel either. But yeah, if I see temperatures in the 20s for the next week, I'll still shovel. But if it's 40 tomorrow and it's snowing today, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no. But yeah,
So there's these different factors, and there's just three of them, right?
yeah.
From the vital factors to the cost of energy going higher to property taxes going higher. Those are just three
Mhm.
factors that are happening today, right here, right now, that are driving the population more from being, away from being owners and more so being renters.
Yeah.
And it's just data. It's not that I'm pushing folks into a particular narrative to say, oh, invest in real estate or anything. I'm just saying, I study it.
Mhm.
This is why I'm in real estate because
Mhm.
I know for the multifamily space that I invest in, I can speak to it up, down, and sideways and help my investors understand why
Yeah.
they need to be in this space because we believe long term, this is, it's almost like the next,
Mhm.
gold rush is here
Yeah.
with multifamilies.
Obviously, I'm in the same business, and of course, yeah, I've looked at the same trends, and it's not just the renters. I mean, I think looking at differences between generations, I've got a 22-year-old daughter and a 25-year-old daughter. Right? When my wife was 22, we had two kids. And our kids are holding off a little bit longer, and it's It is very generational, and I think it's going to persist for a while as well. It's going to be, I mean, home ownership has its benefits, and I think that that's still where most people want to get to in the nation, but it's slowing down, you know.
Here, you mentioned your daughters, which thank you for sharing that personal perspective. And and this is an interesting fact.
Mhm.
Do you know the typical age of a first-time home buyer?
Right now, I would probably say 35.
Yeah, you're very close.
Yeah.
Uh, 2 years ago, when I started presenting on this, 2 years
Mhm.
ago was 36.
36. Okay.
And today, it's risen to 38.
Wow.
Right. And so I bring that up is because, you look at the time between you mentioned your daughter's 22, 25. Between that age and 38 years old, they're renters.
Yeah.
So the period of time is growing
Mhm.
whereby they are staying renters for longer.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I see that with my kids. I mean, I was 29. And honestly, the only reason I was 29 is, I spent several years in the military. I think I wanted to buy my first house when I was like 25, 26, out of college, had a good job. That's the first thing I was trying to do. But, talking with my kids,
Yeah.
it's not even on their mind right now. It's like,
Yeah.
someday, someday is kind of what's on their mind.
It's just we're in a different time and place.
Yeah.
And, not for nothing. I mean, employers as well as workers are less loyal these days.
Yeah.
And so we, just as people, we're more nomadic. And so, I would be thinking about it differently too. If I was a young person, I was looking at it, I would say, you know what? I'm 25 years old. Do I really want to buy a house and limit my work radius
Hmm.
to 20
Yep.
miles, 30 miles?
Yep.
Or do I want to stay a renter?
Hmm.
And if I get laid off or if I want to go find another job, I can just pack up
Easy.
and go. Easy.
And that's a really good point. It's something that I mean, when I was in the military, I moved every 2 to 3 years. We rented more than we lived in a home that we owned, right? And that was exactly for the reason you were thinking of. And I kept the same employer for 20 years, but it came with constant moves. And that's, when you look at dynamics, people are staying with their jobs for, fewer and fewer years or less and less time. And so now the dynamic is, do I buy a house right now, not knowing if I'm going to work for the same company in 2 or 3 years? That is a dynamic I've never really thought about, but it is 100% there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I apologize, Brian, because I got us a little off track with that whole renter nation thing. But
No.
I was actually on a path in terms of helping your audience just kind of see maybe a path for themselves in terms of, where does it go from, because I get asked
Mhm.
quite a bit, hey, where did you start and how did you get doing what you're doing today? So today, we work with investors, we create funds, we buy larger apartment complexes. Our last one was 153 units,
Nice.
just outside of Miami, Florida, right? So big apartment complexes, right? And so I mentioned that from the standpoint of we all started someplace,
Yeah.
right? And I started with a quad that I still
Mhm.
own today, and some other buildings that I still own today. And I, so to speak, transitioning from that to being a partner
Mhm.
or in some sort of a joint venture with someone else to do large scale
Mhm.
purchases, right? Because a lot of folks do have that on their mind. Oh, I want to buy a 20 unit complex or 40 or
Mhm.
60 or 100, whatever it is, right? How do I bridge that gap? Well, the
Mhm.
way you bridge that gap to get to that side of things is you need to bring value,
Mhm.
right? Nobody is going to partner with somebody who's not bringing any value. So for me, I realized my superpower, so to speak, in terms of real estate was property management.
Yeah.
I knew it well. I property manage my own buildings, right? And so for me, that was a realization that I bring forward today when I work with sellers, when I work with partners to do deals. That's a huge benefit of that I bring to the table. Other people, right? Like as you're going through this, other folks may be great at being spreadsheet jockeys,
Mhm.
and they may be great at underwriting, And that's great. That's another superpower you could bring to the table. Other people are great at networking and they're just naturally very easygoing and they like talking to people and they have a huge network. They're great capital raisers, right?
Mhm.
I was kind of hoping to share the Cliff Notes version of my of my progression, but it's the entire episode here. But that's really where I am today. And how you get to that point today is you have to figure out what your superpower is. It could be like mine, property management, or it could be being a great underwriter. It could be a great capital raiser. There's different types of vehicles you can use. But as you start off, you're buying your first, your second, your third. Think about that. Think about like what are you really good at that you can now share with someone else to partner and do bigger deals.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes two or three deals for you to realize, what your superpower inside this industry is, and that's something that I realized really quickly. I started out, managing assets, 'cause that was kind of like my role. And then, went from there to raising capital, and it took me a while to figure out, where I best fit in the whole structure. So yeah, I think it does sometimes. It helps knowing what you're good at going in, but it still took me a while to find myself once we had a couple of properties.
It's funny. I mean, like for me, I don't necessarily like raising capital. That's not what gets me jazzed. What gets me jazzed, like if you hear me talking about a property and I'm like really excited about it, that's the deal you want to be in.
Yeah, I'm
Because
I'm I'm
I
the
don't
visionary. I'm like that. That's kind of like my superpower is looking at something and seeing what it could be. And that's what I love. I love buying properties that are just like a blank canvas and think, you know what, we're gonna do a lot of good to this property. We're gonna make it look so much better. And yeah, I think that's something that I really enjoy doing. And I'm with you. I don't enjoy raising capital. I look at it as a necessary evil. But yeah, you really got to do that though.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hope some of those stories help, right? I'm very
Yeah.
much a storyteller. I like, just sharing different stories.
Yeah.
I hope that helps some of your audience, right? Some of your listeners on your podcast, just kind of hear some different perspectives from the diary of an actual real estate investor.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting. I do like what you shared about the renter nation. It is something we all look at reasons to get in, and reasons to stay in. I mean, honestly, there was the last 2 or 3 years hasn't been the best for multifamily. And, I saw a lot of other people jump ship and go find, more fertile pastures. Self-storage got a lot of people, but, when I start looking at it, it's things like, the renter nation philosophy. It's looking at, the population growth and the housing shortage and, the supply demand and everything else. That's what kept me in the game was just realizing multifamily has a bright future. It really does.
And here's another interesting statistic. So we're somewhere between 4.5 to almost 8 million units shy, housing units shy in this country. 4.5 million to almost 8 million shy. And there were in 2024 the most in 50 years, the most
Yep.
apartments put online. Do you want to guess what that number was?
680,000. Depends on which data source. 680,000.
So, yes, yeah, yes. Right. The number I have in my head is 588,000, but it doesn't matter. We're very close, right?
There were two data sources that put it out, and they were off by 100,000. One said 580, one said 680. So yeah, I mean,
So you call it 600 just for easy numbers, right?
yep.
600,000 apartments put online in 2024, the most that has ever come online in 50 years. 2025, they're already predicting the number's not going to be that high. And we still have the housing shortage,
Hmm.
continues today. It just lends itself to housing being a scarce resource
Yeah.
for folks and a non-affordable resource for folks. And so when you have scarcity, economics 101, right? When you have scarcity, what happens to the price of something?
Goes up.
It goes up.
Wow.
Exactly. Right. So again, all these little things about like, we talk statistics, we talk about Renter Nation, yeah, it's more than just,
Hmm.
as I say, it's more than just cash on cash return calculation. It's more than what your cap rate is. It's more than what you're paying per door. Those are all important things. I'm not saying don't do those calculations. Yes, do them, understand them. But the bigger elephant in the ring are these things we're talking about, right? The fact that the typical age of a first time home buyer is 38 years old in the United States. That's a big deal, right?
Hmm.
The fact that only 600,000 units, apartment units, were produced last
Hmm.
year, the most in 50 years, right? That's
And it barely put a dent into that. Yeah.
that's big data that we need to understand that gives us the confidence to say, why am I investing in real estate in multifamilies? Oh, this makes sense. This is where I want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what keeps me doing it. It's long term, the future looks bright. You never know short term. That's the hard part about it. What's going to happen to interest rates, what's going to happen to, values and everything else. But when you step back and look at the big picture, all you see with the big picture is real estate prices going up over time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. In short term, when we talk about buying property short term, we always
Mhm.
sometimes we have value add in mind, but forgetting that for a minute, for a lot of first-time home buyers or real estate investors buying a duplex or a single family, you want that to cash flow on day one, right?
Yeah.
Do not buy for appreciation. I'm sorry if there's some that if this goes against the grain for them. If you are buying and you're not getting cash flow on day one, that just makes it a lot harder to be a real estate investor because things will go wrong, things will break, you will need to fix things. So that's one thing that definitely we need to keep in mind. The other thing I share with folks, as first time real estate investors, and I think this is pretty important because real estate's an investment, is a relationship business, right? Not just with your investors and your bank and your this, that, the other, right? It's with your tenants as well, right? So if you go in mind with purchasing a property and you're going to increase the rents, say, oh, I'm going to increase the rents $200, per door, that's okay. But it's a relationship with those tenants. And maybe think about doing something good for those tenants and not just jacking up the rent. Maybe go in there and say, hey, yeah, I need to because I need to. But you know what? Would it be nice if, like, would you want a ceiling fan in your living room and in your bedroom? Is that something that, I can have my electrician come by and install two ceiling fans, one in your living room, one in your bedroom for yourself? Is that something you guys would like? And it's not going to take away the sting that you're increasing the rent $200 per month, but it does show that you're willing to do something nice for them as well.
I like that idea. It's give or take. Now, of course, what you didn't say that I do want to point out is you're not able to raise somebody's rent $200 a month unless the market is sufficient for that. Otherwise they're going to move out, But if you're at the top of the market and you're raising rent 200, you're going to have zero people renting from you 12 months from now. But there's a part of that that a lot of people don't look at, is if you can raise 200, it means the property you're under market by quite a bit to begin with. But yeah, I like that idea. What can we do? Normally, I do a lot of value adds, and so we're typically waiting for people to move out. And when they move out, we renovate their units. And so when we're typically doing the $200 rent bumps, we're giving people, brand new renovations, and we're offering that to the people who are at the property anyway. So the first unit we renovate, we're offering it to the people who already live there and saying, who wants to have this brand newly renovated unit? By the way, it is going to cost about $200 more, but you're going to have new appliances, you're going to have new finishes, you're going to have new everything. That's that value creation that you were talking about earlier. Just
Yeah,
within
in the relationship, right? To be able to offer it to existing tenants first,
yeah.
that's like, wow, Brian thought of us first before he
Mhm.
put it on market and somebody else rented it that, I mean, you're
Yeah.
creating that community there that's
Mhm.
going to feed off of itself. So
Yeah.
if you, that's a great idea.
Yeah, and the type of people who get the new units, they're the ones that create the community. They're the ones that want to live there, and so that strategy works well from many, many, many different angles. But anyway, we are at the top of the hour already, so we probably ought to wrap this up. As fun as it's been talking, I always finish with the same three questions, so we're just going to hit them. If you had to give advice to somebody who's just starting right now in their multifamily journey, what would that advice be?
Find a mentor. Find somebody who's already done what you want to do and attach yourself to that.
First,
And if you have somebody in your local community that you know is doing this and you have as a friend, great, it's free. If you have to go out there and pay up for that service, go out there and pay up for that service. It's going to pay dividends for years and years and years. It may actually pay dividends in a generational way, such that long after you're gone, your family is still getting benefits from that real estate empire that you built, right? So paying up for it is long-term cheap.
and coaching for me is what allowed me to replace my income, and so, yeah, 100% agree on that one. All right, next question. What's next for you?
Wow, what's next for me? So we continue to buy. We have another fund that we're starting for 2025. We're going to buy another large apartment complex, which we're super excited about. So that's business, but more personal. We do a lot of international travel. I just received my second citizenship. So I'm a U.S. citizen, but I also received citizenship in Portugal, where my parents were from. And so we're looking at doing some international real estate investing, which is going to be different, new, haven't done it before. And so that's really exciting and new. And so, yeah, we're looking forward to that.
That does sound fun. Now, are you fluent in Portuguese?
I would hardly say I'm fluent.
Right.
I can get by enough to do what I need to do.
I can get by in Brazil. That's a different kind of Portuguese than porky cheese. Well, all the kids at I almost said the same thing, but
We're
Portuguese.
probably not too far apart in our abilities, Brian.
Yeah. All right. Last question. How can listeners learn more about you?
The best way, yeah, go to my website, dirtybootscapital.com. That shows all that I do. If anybody has a particular question, they want to reach out to me, I check my emails daily, right? So shoot me an email, Tony Lopes with an S, Tony Lopes at dirtybootscapital.com, and I'll get back to you right away.
All right, and we'll have that in the show notes for anybody looking to reach out and get in touch with Tony. So, hey Tony, thank you very much for your time today. Very much appreciate the Renter Nation dialogue and hearing more about yourself.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, Brian. Thank you so much for having me on.